Now we know the core Vuex features. We'll see it in a more realistic app in a second. Before we go there though, let's talk about a couple of utility features, which make our life as a developer a bit easier. And let's start with mappers. In the counter, for example, we have this counter computed property where we in the end just access our final counter getter. So we have this code here just to get access to our getter. Now this is obviously not a lot of code, but we're not doing anything besides drilling into our store. This is not horrible, but in case you're not happy with that, Vuex has a helper which you can use. You can import something from Vuex, and that something is a map getters function. You can use it inside of this computed object. Instead of defining a computed property on your own, you can call map getters here, and this will return an object which you can then spread with the free.spread operator into your computed property object. So map getters gives you an object which we now merge into the computed properties object. Because the object map getters will give you is an object full of computed properties which are defined automatically for you. Well, now which computed properties do we get here? Well, map getters takes an array as an argument, and in here you list all the getter names as strings which you want to have as computed properties in this component. So in this case, for example, the final counter, but of course we could have multiple getters here. And now this will give us a final counter computed property in this component, which automatically points at the final counter getter. And with that, we just need to change this here to final counter, because that will be the computed property name. And then if we reload, it still works as before. But now with map getters, especially when you use multiple getters in a given component, you might be able to save some code and not drill unnecessarily into the store all the time. Now we have something similar for state and mutations, but you don't really use those in your components anyways. So let's have a look at map actions then, which also exists to map actions into your components. How does this look like? Let's say in change counter, we don't manually want to define methods, which in the end also just drill into the store to dispatch some action there. Instead, we could, just as with getters, import something from Vuex, and that something here is map actions. Now, just as with map getters, we call map actions now inside of methods though, not inside of computed, but inside of methods. We call map actions like this, and again get back an object which we merge with the methods object by using the spread operator. Map actions now also takes an array, and now here we define all the action names which we want to have as methods in this component. So in this case, increment. But of course we could also add the increase action here to map both actions to methods in this component. And these methods will be created for you by map actions. That's the idea behind using it. Now with that, we could add a second button, and on the first button, call increment. That's the name of the method which will be created for the increment action, and point at increase on the second button. Now, of course, here we need a payload, and you can simply pass your payload as an argument then. So in this case, an object with a value of 10, because we expect a payload in our store, which will be an object which has a value property. So that's why we pass an object with a value property here, simply as an argument to this automatically created method. And with that, we can change this button caption maybe to 11 to tell it apart from the other button, also change the value. And with that, now we got this new button, which also works. So now we're also mapping actions, and this saves us the time to add those methods on our own. There also is an alternative way of mapping actions. In case you're not happy with the default names, you can also call map actions and not pass an array to it, but an object instead. And then you can define the method names you want to have in your component as keys, for example, inc, and then hold the action which should be mapped to this method as a value. So with that, we could go with inc and increase like this. And with that, the increment action would be mapped to an inc method, increase would be mapped to an increase method. And therefore, we would have to call increment by calling inc now. Increase stays increase because that's how I'm mapping it. And with that, of course, that would still work if we try this. So map actions and map getters can be very, very useful.